Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dan Assor Show. Today, I'm very privileged to have another special guest in the studio. I'd like to introduce you to Jonny Edser. Hello, Jonny. How are you?
Very good, thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. Lovely to meet you again.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a chat before the summer, or at least at the start of the summer. Now it's towards the end of the summer, so lots have gone on in between. So we're going to find out a bit more about the business and what you've been up to. But Jonny, just as a quick introduction, obviously you're the MD and founder of Wildgoose Events.
Yep.
It'd be good to if you can just we're going to talk more about the business, obviously, and the journey that it's been on, and as yourself as well. Can you just give the listeners and the viewers just an update as to what Wildgoose do, I guess?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're a team building business. We are quite unique in that we deliver all of our team activities using technology. So whilst we started off as sort of a treasure hunt business using paper and pencil and digital cameras, we now have an app and we use that to deliver team activities, virtually, hybrid or in person, from anything from 6 people up to 1,000 plus people, all over the world. We've got a business in the UK and the US as well. So
cool.
We work globally 24/7.
Thanks for that, Jonny. It's always useful as well for people that are listening, maybe of a certain age, who are maybe just starting their careers, to understand how you sort of fell into what you did. Because if I'm not mistaken, you first started off when I think you came out of university working for Network Rail.
Yeah, it was Rail Track back then.
Rail Track,
back in the day. And I joined them their graduate scheme. And
right.
What you did in the Rail Track graduate scheme was move around different departments for 3 weeks here, 3 weeks there, and just get some good experience. But I found most of Rail Track quite dull. I love trains, don't get me wrong, but I'm not an engineer. I'm not really into signalling, timetabling. Yeah. But what I really enjoyed was I spent a bit of time in the events team. Yeah. And the events team and the PR team were quite closely connected, and I really enjoyed that. I got involved in the annual general meeting at the Barbican at the time it was, and we used to do road shows and all sorts of things like that. So that kind of gave me my first taste of events, and then
cool.
And then I kind of moved into the station sort of development side. So we were redeveloping the stations, and my last project was St Pancras International before it opened again for the Eurostar. So.
And did you? I mean, that's interesting. Did you always have a sort of vision for yourself that you wanted to run? Put events aside and what you actually ended up doing. Yeah. But did you always think, after maybe your first stint of working for somebody, that you felt you wanted to work for yourself? Where did that sort of fire and ambition come from to set your own thing up?
Well, I found it really hard to work for a big organisation like Rail Track, and a big organisation that's a bit sort of backward facing as well, the old British Rail days. So I found it quite increasingly frustrating working for an organisation like Rail Track.
Sure.
But my dad ran his own business.
Okay.
He's retired now, but he ran his own business, and my granddad ran his own business. And I guess it just felt quite a natural thing to do, to be the sort of master of your own destiny and to run your own business. And sort of I got to a stage where I was thinking I wasn't enjoying my job anymore, and I loved events, and my wife was working in events at the time.
Yeah.
In fact, she'd just gone to work at the Grove as well, and it just opened.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And, we sort of thought, you know what, let's set up an events business. So I quit my perfectly reasonable job.
Yeah.
And I set up an events agency, which was designed to do a few different things like dinners and parties and corporate hospitality. Remarkable little strategy looking back on it, actually.
Yeah.
But at the time, house prices were going berserk, and it was nearly 20 years ago. It was the early 2000s, and kind of every year it felt like your house was just sort of going up in value significantly. Yeah. I thought, well, worst that will happen is I'll just get another job, you know. And, so I remortgaged my house, took some money out against my house, and set up a business, and that was it.
So interesting. So you took the leap, sort of thinking that you can always go backwards, but I guess this is an opportunity to set up a business where I guess you haven't have as much responsibility as you might have.
I had no kids.
Sort of going forward, And
I thought, well, I took out a bit of money against my house, and that was enough to keep me going for the year.
Sure.
My wife was working, so it was like, well, it felt quite low risk. Whereas my dad was 40 when he set his business up. He had 4 kids and a mortgage. Now that takes guts, you know.
So it's never too late. It's never too late.
Never too late, because my dad always wished he'd done it earlier, and I said, well, yeah, Dad, but I didn't really know what you know at 40. You know, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I wish I knew back then what I know now when I set my business up. But it's pros and cons. So I set the business up with a view that I'd do all sorts of different events and things. And on day 3, first phone call I ever got, my phone rang, and someone from T-Mobile was on my website, and they said, "Do you do treasure hunts?" And I said, "Of course we do. We do loads of them, and we do them all over the place. Where are you looking to do one?" And he said, "Oh, I want to do one in Covent Garden." I said, "Oh, great, okay." And he said, "Do you provide digital cameras?" I said, "Yep, absolutely. We provide digital cameras. You've got to go around Covent Garden and learn about Covent Garden. You've got to try and do and earn as many points as possible." He goes, "That sounds fantastic. Can you send me a proposal?" So I had to sort of make up a proposal, and then, we're going to book it. Can have a contract. So I had to make up a contract. So it was all proper, shooting from the hip. But I ran that first treasure hunt in Covent Garden for T-Mobile, and I loved it because I've always been interested in travelling and history and how cities have changed and grown and evolved. And I love that, and it just really appealed to me.
So it's interesting. I guess the lesson there as well is just to say yes. You know, if you feel that you've got
when you're in the first year of your business, you say yes. Later on in life, you learn to say no, but at the beginning, you say yes.
I'm working
because
out
you need the work and you want the work, and actually, it's how you find out the bits that you enjoy. And what I realised at the end of that year is that I loved doing the team building treasure hunts. I didn't care so much for some of the other stuff. So I decided to set up Wildgoose as a separate business, as a separate brand, specifically focused on treasure hunts. My wife thought I was mad, but there was no one really doing it very well. All the competitors were all quite, I don't know, they weren't very cool, they weren't very professional looking. Their websites were awful, and I thought I can do better than this. So, and for the next couple of years, my strategy was just put lots of locations up, and then when people booked them, I'd go and set them up. So I travelled the UK and then eventually Europe, writing treasure hunts, researching places, and having a jolly good time. And then when I remember my first overseas went into Dubrovnik, I thought, this is brilliant. Someone's paying me to go to Dubrovnik to write a team activity and then go out again to run it. So it was it's extraordinary. And this is kind of before the days of Google being, Google was obviously around then, but in terms of the content online was much harder to find. You had to buy books. You had to do a bit more research. It was a bit more, it was very different to what we might do now. But and that was it really. And then kind of stopped doing everything else and just stuck to Wildgoose.
Yeah. So amazing. And obviously you've been doing that. The business has been going for what, almost 18 years now.
Yeah,
right?
18 years. Yeah.
So just from making that sort of one leap of faith after you left, or just before, I guess, you left Network Rail, to saying yes to that first, inquiry from T-Mobile, to a certain extent, obviously sort of lit the touch paper and off and away you were. Obviously, I guess the 18 years, and we're going to talk about where you're at as a business today and sort of the pivot you've made since the pandemic. But over the sort of last 18 years of running your own business, obviously, I'm assuming the business has sort of changed and evolved, and it has to in terms of what people want from it. How have you sort of reacted to changes in the market and sort of, I guess, being ahead of the curve and being able to offer people maybe things different to your competitors and that sort of stuff? Again, if people are listening, in terms of the longevity of running a business and succeeding in that respect, what sort of advice would you give somebody? I kind of always say innovate or die. If you just don't continue to evolve and innovate, you will eventually just get left behind. And it's my biggest fear is that we stop being relevant. It's inexcusable, in fact, in my view. As a business, you have to constantly think. You look at brands that we grew up with that
now no longer exist because they didn't evolve.
Blockbusters,
HM, people who didn't believe in the digital revolution. So I knew my time was coming back in about 2008, 2009, when Google was actually getting quite good. I realised that people could go and sit in the pub, and half of the treasure hunt answers they could answer by Googling them, because it was all on paper and you could see all the questions. And I was starting to think, right, I've got to think of something different here, because people don't need to walk around and explore Cambridge, for example, because they can find all the answers online. I've got to find a better way of doing this. And at that time, I was having my children a similar age to yours, actually, Dan, and they were my daughter was born in 2008 and my son in 2009. And the first thing we launched actually before the app was a self-run activity called the Takeaway, which was a self-run treasure hunt that used automated texting. Because I used to get lots of inquiries from people who didn't have very big budgets. And they said, "Oh, can we use your treasure hunt? We just don't need you," which I took great offence at to start with. But then I saw it as an opportunity. So we developed this texting system, and we started to post out our boxes with these scratch cards, and you had to crack a code and text it in to see whether you got it right. And that was brilliant, because in 2008, when the financial crisis happened, we suddenly had a budget option. What we realised was that, and I think this is relevant for 2022 as well.
Sure.
When economies are a bit uncertain, people still want to do team building. They still want to do activities. They just don't want to spend as much money doing it. So having options that allow you to cater for varying budgets. That was the first lesson I learned, was actually having different things. So we evolved. The timing was great because the crash happened. And actually that first year of the crash, our profits stayed fairly level because we had a cheap option to offer people.
And am I right in saying that was sort of your first foray into, I guess, building your own technology and leveraging the benefits of technology into your products and creating, I guess, a competitive advantage?
Yeah, we had to get someone to build that, because I didn't know.
Yeah,
I'm not a techie, I didn't know how to do that, but we got someone to build this texting system, because I broke my leg in playing football in 2007. It got me thinking about how I could run more events without needing more people, because people go and do things like break their legs, don't they? Which is very inconvenient when you run an events business, especially when you're the main person running the event. So that was our first foray. And then we realised actually this opened up lots of other opportunities. And then I met one of the dads in our sort of NCT group when I was having my children, and he was an IT guy.
You're not meant to be networking. You're not meant to be networking in an NCT.
But I was chatting to him about my business and saying that I want to build an app. Smartphones were starting to become more commonplace. The iPad came out in, I think, 2010. And I was like, I think we need an app, because we need to have GPS-based questions that you can't unlock until you're in that place, because people are going into the pub and Googling answers and cheating. We need to think about how we can evolve. So we built this first app, which took about a year, and was quite hard work, because we're talking 12 years ago. Apps were not as good as they are now. And but I remember we launched it in April 2011, our first app, the GPS Challenge, it was a bit of a slow burn for 6 months, and then it just took off because tech wasn't very reliable back then. So people were worried about, what if it doesn't work?
Sure.
And actually, it did work, and people loved it. And actually, you always get those early adopters, and then you get like the majority, don't you?
Yeah.
And then it really sort of took off, and that really opened my eyes, because it was like, actually, this is a great new product that isn't easy to copy. And it gave us a sort of we sort of grew about 40% a year for the next 3 years. It just gave us a really good boost. Really helped with the business, and gave us a really innovative product that we then started to license, because we started to get approached by other team building companies around the world who wanted to use it as well.
So it shows again you took a risk, which paid off.
Yeah, it was expensive. It was because I looked at license. There was actually one other company I found who did something similar, and they're based in Vienna, and I flew out there, but they wanted too much control of my content, and I didn't want that. So I decided to build my own, which took a year, cost me a reasonable amount of money, but you've got to speculate when you run a business. You've got to take those educated risks. And yeah, it paid off. It worked.
Yeah. So talk to me. We're going to sort of get towards present day. Talk to me what the business was doing, what it looked like, its clients, the sort of team building events you were running before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then sort of what the pandemic meant for you and sort of the change you had to make and sort of where, when you came out, you know, how you adapted for the return of in-person.
Yeah. So we were growing really nicely through the launch of the app. We got to 2016 and we decided to open in America. At the same time, we grew quite significantly the team in the UK. And we were running mainly outdoor GPS team building. That was what we were best known for. And we also were running indoor things. So we had indoor games that we could do in meeting rooms, in museums, and things like that. So that was our product. And we would turn up on site. We'd bring a load of iPads. We had about 300 iPads, one iPad per team. You'd do a briefing on stage. Everyone would run off into Budapest or wherever you were for 2 hours to play the game and then come back and we'd do the results and show the best photos. And that was kind of what we did. And we did it really well. But by the end of 2018, it was really hard to admit this to myself, but I was starting to fall out of love with the business because I was trying to scale it. And what I realized is you couldn't scale team building in that way. I love growth. I love growing businesses. It's really exciting. It presents opportunities for your team. It presents new opportunities. It continually challenges you. I didn't want to just set up a lifestyle business that I could just plod along for the next 30 years until I retired, sort of thing. So I'm pretty hell bent on growth. But I kind of got to the end of 2018. I was thinking, all I've done is I've increased my costs massively by growing the team and opening up in America. But actually, the business has just got significantly more complicated, moving people around and all the rest of it. And we decided in 2019 to bring more tech in-house and grow the tech capability in the business and build the ability for people to book events online and just take some of the admin out of running events.
Yeah.
Because we all know how labour intensive and admin heavy events can be. So we're like, well, if we can get people to book it and really automate or semi-automate that customer journey, we should do that. So in 2019, we built a completely new website. We built a whole new sort of partner portal program, which allowed our agencies to book events themselves and manage certain elements of the events themselves. And that was a hard year, 2019, because not all of my team agreed with it. I lost some key people who just didn't really buy into what we were doing. We were all worried about Brexit, weren't we? Because that was really kicking in 2020. Yeah. Little did we know we'd have this pandemic round the corner, which would change everything forever, really, for many of us. So we went into 2020 with a lot of this tech built, and it was taking a bit longer to sort of get some of the traction on it and get it working. And it was hard. It was a hard year, really hard year of change.
And you took the decision to build in house.
Yeah, so we built in house because we were really lucky. So my CTO Steve, he's been actually working on our tech for quite a few years, and he was looking for an opportunity he was running his own agency with another guy who did a lot of work with us as well. And we spoke to him and said, why don't you come and join us? Because you know the product. These are the plans we've got. We want to really grow the tech side of our business. So we essentially sort of absorbed his agency, which had 4 people in the business. And then, so we brought that in-house because if you're serious about it, you've got to do it in-house, really.
Yeah.
You know, you'll never move quick enough if you outsource it, is my belief. You'll always...
Yeah, I mean, especially if you've got a vision to deliver, you know, something that obviously is already not out there as an off-the-shelf product. And I guess
that's our entire business, Dan. Our whole business is built on tech.
So you don't want to be reliable on someone else's software. So you came through the pandemic.
Yes.
In terms of your offering and how it's offered today compared to 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, just give me a quick summary of the sort of differences.
what we learned with virtual events, because obviously we went very quickly into virtual events when everything cancelled at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were lucky that we were able to adapt to that. What we learned is that virtual events are very scalable because you don't need to travel. You can jump on at a short notice to run an event. We suddenly found this model that actually worked really nicely for clients and for us. And we thought, actually, this is brilliant because you can suddenly reach the world. Everyone in the world is your customer, and we can deliver these for anyone, anywhere, as long as you don't mind getting up in the middle of the night. So when in person started to return, I didn't want to go back to how we used to run our events. I didn't want to start sending people traveling all over the place. I was like, there's got to be another way. I believe that as a business, every business has got a responsibility to become more sustainable as well.
Yeah.
And we were thinking, I used to I've run events in Singapore. I've been in the air more than I've been on the ground. I've flown to Singapore to run a team building event, and then flown back again. And when you actually unpack that, you think that's crazy. People have learned how to use video conferencing. I mean, we're all pros at video conferencing versus 2019. We're all used to using that tech. We don't think anything of it. So we were like, well, there must be a way of us using video conferencing to bring our presenters to where the customer is. Yeah. Explain to them how it works and then send them off to go and do their event. So even if we're doing a GPS challenge around Leeds or New York City, we can beam into there and explain to them how the game works. And then they load the game on their phones and head off to play the game for an hour and a half and then come back for the wrap up and results. So we took a view that was what we were going to do. And the difference now for us as a business is the opportunity is extraordinary because we now have remote hosts all around the world we can book at as little as 24 hours notice. Any game, indoors, outdoors. We've got over 450 locations now set up for our outdoor games. We're adding new ones all the time. People can book it all online. 95% of our events are booked. In fact, 100% are booked online and 90% are booked with a credit card. So you can book it online. You can choose your location, and it's all set up and automated. So we now have this sort of end-to-end solution that's easy for clients to book at short notice, that's sustainable. We've got really great availability. Our capacity is almost limitless because we can bring someone. Whereas in the past, if you ran an event in Toronto, you'd have to have someone in Toronto.
So bring that to life to me. If you can, I don't know if you can give us some examples of a client. I don't know if you can mention the brand or just give us a flavour of what they've done. So if you've got, let's say there's someone listening to this sitting in the States, right, and they want to do a team building event. Yeah. Give us some example of the types of events and how you would deliver it virtually.
Yeah. So what the real penny drop moment for me when I realised that this could really work was when we had a client who was a bank in New York. Yeah. They wanted to do an event in Central Park, a GPS challenge around Central Park. So they'd go around different hotspots to unlock questions and challenges, earning points. Yeah. Paul, my colleague in Egham, just outside London, and Rachel, my colleague in Chicago, beamed in via Zoom to their phones. They watched the briefing on their phones in Central Park. They then loaded the game, played for an hour and a half, and then jumped back into the video call for the wrap-up and results. And then they went for lunch. And I remember thinking, that wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. People would have laughed at us if we suggested that 3 years ago. So what we now do is people get us up on a screen in a meeting room, or they look around a laptop on their plasma TV in their office, and they link into the video call. Our live presenter jumps in, explains the game. They get into teams of 4 to 6 people, download a game, and then it could be a game that they play in the office. It could be one of our high energy sort of challenge-based games, or it could be a tabletop game like an escape game or a murder mystery, or they could head outside into their city to do a GPS challenge. They're supported throughout. We're online. We can message them through the app. They can jump into the video call to talk to us. We're scoring their photos and videos, answering their questions if they've got any questions. And then we do the wrap-up and results. So we're offering anything up to 2.5 hour activity. But it's so much more flexible for the client because they can book it at short notice anywhere. It's 60%. The price is 60% less than what it was pre-pandemic. 7 or more days before, they can change the date because we haven't booked flights or accommodation. They can change the date or time and at no charge. And it's carbon neutral because we offset all the CO2.
Sure. Which we're going to talk about in a second. I mean, just to finish up until team building and obviously building a culture in a company. Obviously, more and more, you know, companies have still got a hybrid way of working, or they didn't renew their leases on offices during the pandemic. So I guess, and funnily enough, I've just come off the back of doing a quiz with the company I'm at the moment. It was just done internally, just a short sort of half an hour, but they did that. They started doing it during the pandemic when no one was in the office. We're now 3 days a week, so they've continued to do it, right? It's a smaller business. They haven't outsourced it, but the concept's still the same. So I guess, you know, team building, games, just virtually with companies that have got several satellite offices, either in the same country or in different companies, I guess, because people tried to do it themselves, I guess, at the beginning of the pandemic. I'll do a quiz, this, that, and the other. So now it's, I guess, come to the fore even more as part of the, you know, opportunity to build a team and instill a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, when we're all in the office most of the time, you naturally found that relationships formed, people spent time with each other. You maybe go to the pub on a Friday. You'd have natural opportunities for team bonding, which happened more organically. Whereas as people work more flexibly, more remotely on different time zones, actually getting people together becomes really important because it's not likely to happen in such a natural way as when you're all together. And I think that's why, you know, the pandemic, we were kind of all forced into virtual events, but actually, you know, it's still 35% of what we do is virtual events because there's still global teams who've suddenly gone, well, actually, we can connect on a Friday and do a fun thing together. We can do something on a monthly basis. And it's good. It's getting us to talk. It's getting us to work together. It's getting, you know, people from different teams to mingle and in that way that they would never have done before. And then for those people going back to hybrid working, you can still go a few weeks where you don't see someone, even though you're going back to the office twice. The person you work with goes in on different days, and if they work in a team that you don't naturally deal with, you can go weeks or months without really having much to do with that person. But you might actually have lots in common, or you might actually build a really good work friendship, or you can build that trust between each other, and rather than just being a name on a list, you become a person. You build that. It's how you build culture and relationships. And it's, I think what's changed is it's become a lot more accessible and easy to do that because virtual events has introduced us to a way. Yeah,
people are used to it as well
of doing that. And I know we all got a bit sick of virtual events over the pandemic. I mean, we all had our fill, and we're not surprised that we've seen a big swing back to in person. But I do believe it continues to play a role in the event mix. I mean, like I say, it's still a third of what we're doing are virtual events. Because it still fills a gap.
Sure. Talk to me about the sustainability piece. Because I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? And I'm not. This is not just at your business, but generally. So obviously, you read a lot about people saying, you know, I'm going for carbon neutral, and my products, you know, it's sustainable and it's good for the environment. The cynic might suggest, well, that's just an obvious byproduct because, you know, you've got a virtual product, and so you can then say, well, you know, it's carbon, you know, it's good for you to use me because it reduces emissions and all this sort of stuff. Talk to me about your journey on sustainability and why it's sort of, I guess, an authentic tenant running through your business.
So we, like many people, we're all forced to work from home. We did have an office in London, which we leased. We had a space in America that was a shared workspace that again we leased. Both of those agreements expired in 2020, and we decided not to renew them. We decided that as a remote first organisation, that made sense for us. It allowed us to rebuild our team during the pandemic and employ people anywhere. So that was the first step. We then realised that actually running events, virtual events, was incredibly carbon efficient. It was carbon. The CO2 emissions were massively reduced from not bringing people together. And it also made it a much simpler business to sort of calculate your carbon emissions. So actually, there's a fairly sort of industry standard as to what someone working from home uses in terms of grams of CO2 on an hourly basis. So we basically look at how many people are on our events. We calculate that by the amount of time, and that generates the amount of CO2 that we generate as a business running our events in the way that we run them.
Yeah.
So we've not only reduced the carbon, because that's always the first step, is what can you reduce, and what you're left with is what you kind of need to run your business. You then offset that. So I agree. I mean, it's easy to be quite cynical, I think, about sustainability and people being carbon neutral. But for us, it's been a conscious choice. We've consciously resisted going back to how we used to run events, because that would have been, we don't believe that's the right thing, A, for our business, but B, from a sustainability perspective. So when people are booking a team activity, they've got a choice. They can book an activity with an organisation that fills up vans full of kit, drives up the M1, gets on a plane and flies somewhere and sets loads of kit up and transports 10 members of staff on airplanes, and they do a team building activity. Or you could use a business like us that doesn't do any of that bit, and you can still get together, but we will just beam in and we will run it, and we won't produce the waste, the CO2 emissions to deliver that. There's merits to both. I'm not here to preach that one is better than the other, but people have got that choice. The flip side, the lovely thing about what we're doing as well is that our prices are significantly lower. So whereas being green usually costs more, being green with us costs less. And I love that about it, because if I genuinely think that most people would do the right thing from an environmental perspective if it was cheaper. The problem is buying environmentally friendly food products generally costs more. And then you always have that challenge, don't you, between doing the right thing, but it's going to cost me more, and I have to make compromises from my monthly budget.
Sure.
Whereas what we're saying is we found a great solution. We've got a carbon neutral solution that costs less. So for me, it makes business sense. It makes sense in terms of where we're going as a journey. But for the customer, it gives them a choice. Yeah.
And out of interest, are the customers telling you, are they coming to you for that reason? Is it just a useful byproduct? Have you seen them?
Yeah, they're not necessarily coming to us for that reason, although we're getting better at telling people about it. But when we tell people about our approach and why we do it, they generally like that. They go,
sure. Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
That's brilliant, because actually that's important for us.
Yeah.
And our job, and big job of mine, is to make sure as a business we're spreading that message a bit better. We're partnering up with organisations who also have a green agenda, because invariably I think it's the biggest. Now the pandemic has subsided in terms of, obviously it's been the big thing for 2.5 years. It's now going to be about the environment. Every one of us has to change what we do if we're going to hit our targets as a global community.
Yeah, it's an interesting one though, isn't it, Johnny? Because with the sort of cost of living crisis, energy prices, ultimately people will look after, number one, and their family first, and possibly, the direction of travel with regards to the environment, and the cost to the consumer might now come second for a period of time. And
this is where scale comes in, because when you get scale and you get critical mass of any product, you drive the price down.
Yeah.
And the minute it becomes more cost effective,
Sure.
people will follow that. And
sure.
We're at that point now. You know, our product is at that point. You don't have to make that compromise on price to do our activity.
Okay, so just give us a sense of what's coming up for you guys. What does the future hold? I know you have a number of clients on I guess an annual pass or a subscription model.
Yeah.
Are you going down that route more? Where do you see? Are you going to be developing your technology? What's the future hold for Wildgoose?
Yeah, we've just launched a couple of interesting products because we've now got icebreakers, which are under 30 minutes. So,
okay,
you know, sort of beaming into meetings and conferences to run a 30-minute activity is now something we can do, which we could struggle to do before. So that's been a great evolution. And actually, we're running icebreakers without our app. What we've recognised is the routes to market that we've built through our website, where you can go on and book an activity. Actually, we've got some amazingly talented hosts, and actually we can bring those into your meeting to run a session, which doesn't need to use any technology. It just uses their skills as a presenter. So that's a really interesting space for us because that opens up lots of other possibilities. And we're expanding the product range. And I think where we really want to be is looking at how we can become more and more integrated into businesses on a more regular basis. So if you go back to pre-pandemic, people might have done a team building activity once or twice a year. With the pandemic, people were maybe doing it once or twice a month. The challenge now is how do you get people doing team activities to build culture on a weekly basis? You know, and that's not delivering events in the guise that they're in now. It's looking at how can you evolve the product so you can do small 5-minute, completely frictionless interventions with people that actually makes Wildgoose part of how you build your culture and develop your teams within an organisation. So we're putting a bit of sort of R&D time into that, which is interesting because I think it's, you know, as the world evolves, as we become more and more flexible around work and remote, we've got to think about continually how do you evolve that company culture, how do you keep building relationships, and once or twice a year isn't good enough. It's not enough. It needs to be more regular than that. With that, it's got to become more affordable. So it's all about driving the price down. That comes through automation, using technology. So, yeah, it continues to fascinate me and excite me.
So you're still enjoying it. Here's to another 14 years.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving it more than I've ever done because I think I can see the potential of it now. And I think it's I think it's our time. I think this time is a time for our sorts of businesses to help organisations as they evolve and change how they work. And I think that's exciting. Like going back to my earlier point, you want to always be relevant, don't you? You always want to feel like you've got a relevant place in your market and that you're an industry leader. And I feel we're in that place, which is exciting.
Good. So I'm going to say to everyone listening that if they're interested in speaking to you and hearing more about the activities that they can do with their staff, they can head to wearewildgoose.com.
That's the one.
And obviously look you up on LinkedIn as well. So listen, Jonny, thank you so much. Jonny Edser, MD and founder of Wildgoose Events, for your time today. We wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.